Welcome back, everyone. Our next speaker joins us from South Africa, bringing a powerful example of how data and collaboration are shaping a nation's energy future. A seasoned leader with experience across engineering, finance, and public policy, he currently serves as the CEO of the Energy Council of South Africa. Please welcome James Mackay with the session EDMSA, Shaping the South African Energy Transition Through Data and Modeling Collaboration.
Very good morning. Good, we'll give him a minute. Everyone settled? Fantastic. My name is James Mackay. I'm the CEO of the Energy Council of South Africa. It's a very dramatic entrance. I'm not used to this. It's all very well prepared, but it's fantastic to be here. I arrived yesterday. A quick shout out also some of my colleagues, I think somewhere, Sonwabo and Prudence, also representing Eskom. And also just acknowledging James Hunt from Energy Exemplar. I think it's the James squared combination that has worked well, and we've put a lot of effort into this whole program. Here we go. So just before I start, I must say it feels very intimidating having flying sharks and AI. I generally feel like I'm in the swamp wrestling alligators every day. So I think in the South Africa context, we have a long way to go. I'll touch on it, but we've come through some real kind of crises. I think a lot has changed very quickly, and now we're sort of rapidly starting to really enter our energy transition. And so a lot of what we're battling and facing at the moment, really, I think to a certain extent, audience here today, you've probably all forgotten what that looked like and have moved on to sort of the AI and flying sharks. So I'll just quickly introduce the Energy Council, touch on South Africa, where we're at the moment, and then EDMSA, which was our innovation, as I said, the James Squared program, and Dion actually, we started the thinking sort of probably 18 months ago, really trying to work out what does energy data and modeling for South Africa look like, how do we kind of move in this direction, because there were significant gaps, which we'll talk about. And then obviously that journey with Energy Exemplar and then using Plexus to try and bridge that gap and create some innovation relative to where South Africa is, which we've got a lot to do. So just touching on the Energy Council and what you'll see, so we are registered not-for-profit company in South Africa with a board. We were established by a big business really in 22 with a focus on the Energy Council, of the energy transition of South Africa. Really recognizing this is very important, we have to do it. But I think across the board also there's significant capacity and capability gaps in public sector and government. And so business really had this view and focus that we have to mobilize capacity, be focused on implementation, be a strategic partner to government. And so the Energy Council was set up to do that. And I was fortunate enough to be employee number one. And so had the privilege of getting a blank sheet of paper in terms of designing it. I was previously energy strategy lead actually for PwC strategy, and so kind of came from a bit of a consulting background where we always said, never waste a good crisis. So the Energy Council we've been running for now 2.5 years, and we really did start with a real crisis. I think if just set the scene a little bit for those who don't have a background of South Africa, we are probably one of the most coal-dependent economies, and then obviously hence emissions. We also have struggled and suffered from, I think, years of bad politics, corruption, state capture, which people would have read about, then went into COVID, and so real low growth and really resulting in quite deep fiscal and social deficits. And so we'll touch on a few of those aspects. So we now are in this pivot. I think a lot has changed, and I'll touch on those, but we really now need to start accelerating and moving forward into our energy transition. So it is very exciting times. I was chatting to Andrew early on. As the Energy Council, we joined the World Energy Council last year and have established a South Africa committee for the World Energy Council. So we're building these kind of blocks and platforms, but really 23 was the low point. So People might have heard about load shedding. Well, we had a lot of it. So really your choice on a daily basis was kind of were you going to be out of power for 3 hours or potentially 4 or 6 hours. And I think people got very scared when they said they were upgrading the code for regulating load shedding from then a stage, what we had is a stage 6, and they said they were going to take it all the way to stage 18, so the system operator had better structure. But I mean, there was concern that where was the bottom of the barrel? And at the same time, South Africa was also struggling in the transport and logistics space. Our state utility Transnet was really battling, and we'd also just been put on the Financial Action Task Force grey listing and had investment downgrades. So really what happened was this real crisis which led to a partnership between business and government. This was very positive and established kind of a new way of working, a lot of collaboration, a big shift around transparency. 2 big focus areas was, one, how do we get out of load shedding, which really was a focus on Eskom's power station performance. A huge amount of work was done there. Representing business, so the Energy Council coordinates under Business for South Africa. That's the brand you see in the middle. There was the National Energy Crisis Committee was established under the President's guidance in the partnership. But at times, we had over 100 private sector engineers supporting, working on technical issues at power stations. So 23-24 really was a rapid shift and surprised a lot of people who thought that we would be in load shedding for at least kind of 3 to 5 years. So we got out of structural load shedding. And then if we come back to, if we think of the World Energy Council's trilemma, we've had to expand that into a quadrilemma. So if I start in the end, so as I said, low growth, fiscal deficits, we have the highest Gini coefficient probably in the world and unacceptably high unemployment. So the energy transition is very pressurizing from a kind of political, economic perspective and affordability. If we think of the security aspect, a really hard lesson learned that we've lost control of security through kind of bad maintenance and a fallover of the power station fleet. That has resulted actually in an extended sort of investment program to solve load shedding, but an extension of coal. So we have got more coal in the system for longer, and it's still our dominant, over 80% of our generation comes from coal. So you can think of the sustainer of the security leg, first has been compromised and is a very important position now from a planning and modeling perspective is how do we make sure we don't get back there. The next one around affordability have referenced low growth, real fiscal sort of challenges and deficits, and so the affordability concern, especially at the lower income and sort of smaller business levels, that's quite raw and a huge political concern. And we see this coming through in municipal kind of failures and municipal debt issues towards for the utility on central buying. And then sustainability, we've got this extension of coal. So some real challenges that one can reflect if we think of the trilemma and we add to that unemployment and jobs and we kind of create a quadrilemma. Andrew, we must upgrade the World Energy Council's view there. That said, I think the shift and the push through the partnership was very positive. What we also the other part of that push was sector reform. And so we have now changed and promulgated the Climate Change Act. So our NDC targets and obligations are legally entrenched. Carbon tax is a reality. But also the amendment of our Electricity Regulation Act, which really legally entrenches the unbundling of the central planning, central utility model and the shift into a liberalized market. So those are very positive aspects. We've also had a number of new frameworks being approved through the public sector programs, things like our transmission planning, the market code development, getting ready for the wholesale market launch, and other areas of reform also in the municipal and distribution space. So a lot has shifted very quickly. That's very positive. But I think really what is now challenging is the implementation. So just a quick touch. This was on the left-hand side, the businesses that got together in the partnership arrangement with government, creating a pledge that said, as business and government together, we pledge to work in partnership collaboration in order to recover economic growth and focus on employment and improvement in the economy. So that has established a platform of governance and accountability, which I think previously never existed. And this really was the platform that we were able to really use in order to be more innovative and start introducing things like EDMSA and Plexus Cloud that we are now trying to use. So just a quick update on where we're at the moment. So the big challenges that we face. So coal fleet is still the dominant generation and will be for a number of years, probably 20 years. Reliability is very low. It's got to improve. If reliability falls again, we will be back in load shedding. So energy security from that perspective is a concern. We are seeing an increase now in renewable energy generation, a bit of a forced credit extension, and that's very positive, but we're not at the pace where we need to be able to build in order to allow kind of decommissioning of coal in the future. We have a potential gas kind of crisis coming. So our current gas comes through from Mozambique Pandatamani field. That's running dry. We need gas to power. It's behind schedule, and we also need industrial gas. We need LNG. BESS needs to accelerate, but we have got the first rounds that are moving. So I think moving in the right direction, but needs to move faster. From affordability, as I said, what we are seeing is the cracks around how do we fund the transition costs and the socio-economic cost. When one considers decommissioning sort of 20, 30, 40% of these coal stations, the communities around them, the jobs, the supply chains, how do we fund that? How does that get supported? And then obviously, we now are having to accelerate our transition at a time when we are still facing high emissions, but pressure from things like certainly carbon border adjustment mechanism and carbon tax coming in. So there's a lot of pressure in the system, although it's been a very positive move. We're moving in the right direction, but we need to accelerate. So really then, how did we get onto EDMSA as our journey? And really it started in 24. We started trying to do some modeling work saying, what are the positions that we're going to take as Energy Council? What do we need to do moving forward? Two important things was that we felt that there was a lack of an integrated view and an overly concentrated view on supply side. And so we needed to have more integration, and we need to have a lot more scenario planning just because of the nuances and the challenges that we were facing. So we did that work, which was very insightful and gave us a couple of kind of key platforms to start building on. And so the concept around how do we improve data and modeling, how do we improve the data and modeling landscape, create more awareness, create more transparency, and start trying to say, how do we create a single version of the truth? And so really then we came up with the idea of this data and modeling platform, really to support the transition, creating transparency, shared space to share that, engage on that, and then importantly access. So how could we create more access, lower the cost, make it easier for people like me who don't know how to model in Plexus, don't know AI and flying sharks? So what could we do in order to also be able to engage on a platform? So we came up with the idea and then started engaging with Energy Exemplar, saying, how could we do this? And so obviously Plexus Cloud then onto what we call the tenant interface, which is really the playbook, created that ability to create a next layer of connectivity and to simplify the connectivity and meet the aspects that we were trying to achieve. So we were encouraging broad usage. We are not a consultant. We're not going to provide services in consulting. And so we want to create as much openness and as much transparency and engagement around modeling as possible, because we have no commercial interest in it in itself. So that's where we started with EDMSA. This is roughly where we've got it. So we've got Plexus Cloud, we've got the playbook and the tenant interface, which I'll talk to, and then we've got paired with a separate website, which is currently in development and will get launched. But essentially that unpacks what is sitting behind there, what do people need to see and understand. And so you'll see the typical things that I think you all know a lot better than I do. I won't talk about the homepage, that's what I do, but when things, platform scenarios, the model structure, getting into these things, key assumptions, how do we think about these, making that visible, making it accessible. And so this we will largely create as open, there is a 3-tier structure to be able to access EDMSA that we've created. The top tier, well actually tier 3, is directly to the Plexus cloud. That we'll leave to James to help us manage that, but that's if you really want direct access, you want to use the model, which we have peer-reviewed independently and put up in Plexus Cloud, and we will review on a regular basis. The next tier down is at the playbook level in the tenant interface to be able to run your own data, use the structured data that is there, and start develop outputs and push it to the cloud and pull it back. And then the sort of the more open access, which is free of charge, but you do have to register, will be access to all the data, being able to review assumptions, look at outputs, compare things, but not actually being able to create your own data in the playbook. So we've tried to be very creative and innovative around access and transparency of aspects. So this is the overall structure of what we created, and this is currently in development. And please, this is kind of a website under review, so it's not quite there yet, but at the moment, the Plexus side and the modeling is up and running. But if one looks at, this is the structure that we are creating and will launch. So it's got these, the analytics, the data, the technical aspects, but paired then with the connectivity and the ability to share in a very transparent, robust way. That single version of the truth was really what we said, we need to have more of that. I'll also just call out, when we did our strategy work in 24, we realized also that there was a lack of good communication, lack of trusted communication. And so we also have launched a platform called Mzansi. And Mzansi is really just a colloquial word for South Africa. It comes from a Xhosa name. And so derived from that, but so we've got that, and that's got its own separate URL and up and running already. And so we publish a lot of data and facts and information on the Mzansi kind of platform. So we started pairing these things together and creating the structure. You don't have to read this, but I will touch on just one or two things, I think, as we look forward. So I don't have the time, and I didn't track it. I don't know if so you can let me know if I'm running late. If we talk about current status, there we go. If we talk about current status as we look forward, so we've got a lot of coal in the system. We have an extension of coal. Currently planning says, we've got 2 big tranches of coal decommissioning periods. So sort of 29 to 32, about 8.5 gigs, and then sort of late 30s into 40s, another big tranche of sort of 15 gigs. This is expensive, challenging. It has social issues, technical issues, financial issues that need to still be resolved. But nonetheless, if we think back to the emissions component, that is one of those kind of trajectories. We have a nuclear station that has just been through an extended life. It's now got another 20 years. A question that was asked earlier, and South Africa is grappling with at the moment. What does a nuclear program look like for South Africa? If we've got a nuclear program and a nuclear plant, it kind of makes sense. Well, is that a platform that we can leverage? How will we move forward? And most importantly, what is affordable? So I think that there's that view as well. I've mentioned gas. We're of the view, our modeling said we need probably about 5.4 gigs of gas by 2030. We're running really tight on that, and we probably are behind, to be honest. And this couples both with the industrial gas shortage as well as gas to power in the system. And so that's also an area which needs to move quite quickly. In terms of renewables, I think that has been a very positive story. So the load shedding crisis, in a sense, deregulated the sector very rapidly, and what we saw was a real response from private sector, sort of almost a forced credit extension of, invest and build. And so that's been very positive. Our view is that we probably will connect this year over 2.5 gigs of wind and solar, next year probably 3.5, and by 27 above 5. So real rapid growth in the industry is creating a lot of positive sort of investor outlook, jobs, and sentiment. So I think that's very good. The challenge, as we all know, no transmission, no transition. And so grid expansion and capacity is a challenge. That also needs a lot of focus. Government has said that they're going to look at independent transmission projects funded by the private sector. but obviously there's complications with how do you do that in a public sector network, public assets, and a state operator. So a lot of work needs to be done there. And then, from a demand-supply balance, I think to me the most important aspect here is we've learned a very hard lesson, socially and economically, around loss of energy security. And so it's very critical. It's become almost a binary thing, is that we've got to protect that energy security going forward. So I think, these are some of, as we look forward, a lot of investments needs to happen very rapidly, but we are about to also launch our wholesale market. So that's targeted for April next year. And that is shifting now, where historically we had sort of the national treasury, state security provided to anchor renewable development. We've now moved through the phase where it's predominantly anchored by corporate balance sheets through bilaterals, and now we're trying to move into a market to underpin that security. So that's causing uncertainty in the financing sector. I think that there is going to be a slowdown and a bit of consolidation. And so we're going to have to think about how we maintain the investment rates and confidence in the financing component of things. So these are some of the key challenges which we have to look at as we move forward. So I won't touch, I was just kind of looking at some of the structure that we've put forward, but I want to get onto, so how have we then used Plexus to try and simplify and achieve our objectives? Well, really, if you're a sort of want to have a quick look, there's the first four. You can get onto the tenant interface in the playbook. You can look, you'll see number one is that there are predefined outputs, which you can also pick up and analyze through the website. You can also build your own set of data. So you can have a proprietary set of data that you also want to create and prepare. So if you took something like a coal decommissioning or costs or any build constraints, you could pick and look at the base data that is there, but you could also create your own data set. You can then, number three, push that to the cloud, run it very quickly, pull that back down, and you can compare multiple versions. So you might want to see what does it look like for early coal decommissioning, late coal decommissioning. Then let me look and compare the outputs on a single graph, and those you can push through Power BI out of the tenant interface. So it's not designed to try and create an investment decision, and I think that the very detailed sort of technical analysis, but really what you can see here is that if you are sitting at this level, it is cheap, it's affordable, it's easily accessible. We think it is very versatile, and it will be able to, we hope, really start stimulating the scenario planning around these kind of constraints and really very real challenges that we have at a kind of fiscal, economic, social, political level of really moving into our transition now. So really, that's sort of the work that's been done. We continue to build this with the team, with James. I think it's been a fantastic journey as we've signed up now a 3-year program on Plexus Cloud, including some technical support. Sergey is always keeps us on track and helps us to do a lot of that behind the work technical support. So again, we haven't had to build that technical capability, but Energy Exemplar has helped us to really be able to be much more agile and focus on the sort of front-end implementation, and they give us this kind of really deep technical support. I look forward to trying to sophisticate this. I keep telling James our next phase of development, I think, is definitely the market as we launch. It's amazing to hear earlier on the forecasting that you do on the European market. We think that next year we will open phase 1 of the market. I think it'll be a very simplified, largely hedged, controlled market, but at least it will be the start of a wholesale market. I think it's going to be a phased opening of development, and then we'll have to focus on expanding liquidity in order to really create that sort of investment underpin around our energy transition. So yeah, that's it. We're looking forward to the road ahead. Our focus is implementation and investment. That's the measure that we've got to talk about. We're not trying to do research and lobby work. We're really just trying to make a lot of capacitation available because we've got a lot to do in a very little amount of time. So hopefully that's given you some good information and ideas and a bit of insight on South Africa. Yeah, but thanks for listening. I don't know if there are any questions that anyone would like to ask. Probably got a few minutes.
James, your stakeholder chart was remarkably complicated. Number one, how on earth do you try and orchestrate that? And secondly, how do you not fall into the pitfall of commercial interests and doing what you're doing?
Yeah, so we focus quite a lot on governance, and then it kind of is what it is. We've said our objective is the energy transition, and we stand always trying to push what is in the interest of South Africa, Inc. And so there are trade-offs, there are a lot of trade-offs that are needed. Not everyone's going to be happy. I mean, our member base at the moment is actually interestingly shifted. I mean, we were predominantly started by sort of large mining industrial. We are now dominated by developers, traders, and actually the finance sector. And so we have had stages where we've got different members going like, I'm not happy, and I need more of this and less of that. And I think that, what we've found is that by creating these platforms and the independence, having something like EDMSA, and we say, well, that if you can give us better data, better insight, better assumptions, well, let's run it. And so, really I think that we can't be the market leader in technology or anything, but what we can try and do is be a fast follower. And so if we can learn, if we can run scenarios, and we can understand, especially the impact at a economic level, then I think politics is much more willing to make harder decisions. But the risk is always that as a developing economy, that if we kind of lose control of socioeconomic impacts, and we end up with a sort of a two-tier market where corporates and wealthy can kind of move and invest and lower their cost and get kind of clean energy, but everyone else is just stuck, then we really, the cracks start to open up very quickly, and then we really do stall. So there's a lot to manage, but I think these type of platforms and creating that independence really is the key that we try and focus on. And maybe one more question, if anyone has, or anything else about Africa, South Africa? Elephants, crocodiles, sharks. We do have sharks, lots of great white sharks. There's a question over there.
Hi, James. Thanks for sharing these insights. Could you share a little bit more about what the wholesale market will be about? Is this a place where the IPPs will be able to submit bids to contracts that are being put out, and is this for shorter time frames? Please.
Yeah, so the target to launch is April next year. It's a little bit unclear as to what the phasing will be at the moment. Indicatively, I think we'll launch really as a public sector, so Eskom. So that'll be Eskom current generation, Eskom generation to distribution. So bringing all the coal stations that currently are run on a merit order behind the scene with a system operator, bringing that in a sense in front of the paywall. So we start seeing what does an SMP look like, and what is the actual energy trade and the cost in the system. With that is also the public sector bids that have brought IPPs through. So we call those sort of Section 34 because they're essentially a single buyer IPPs. Those can be brought through the central purchasing agent and bid into the market to create the first start of the balancing market. Those two sections, however, are actually fully regulated. So there's regulated caps on all of that. So essentially it has a natural hedge. So it's a very sort of de-risked launch of the market, and you don't quite bring private sector in yet. The next stage would be naturally to bring in all generators on balance responsible and then start opening up to market participants. One of the key challenges is going to be how to bring corporate bilaterals in, because they have those PPAs largely were not written with the market in mind. There are many of them which just don't kind of allocate a lot of the risks. They don't forecast correctly. They don't consider being in a marketplace. So I think that there's quite a lot of work to be done on that. And then After that would be sort of opening up a capacity market and then ultimately also looking at a REX or a green credits market. And then opening up the sort of liquidity over time. So at the moment, the focus really is getting, so the licensing, the codes, that's all under play, getting the technical platforms in place, reskilling and structuring the regulator, setting up the central purchasing agent, and the actual market operator capability. So that's the target, and with the launch date sort of for April next year. But I think it'll take quite a lot of time to create kind of real liquidity. And in the interim, we've got to have to think around the impact on financing. So how will corporate bilaterals keep kind of leaning in and providing that security? We can't put it on the country balance sheet. There's kind of too much. Eskom doesn't have the balance sheet to carry it. So I think we could see a little bit of lean financing, and the cost of the risk premium is going to have to go up. So we are going to have to see some shifts around financing. So I think there's quite a lot that still needs to be worked out in the wholesale market, but very positive that we're now kind of moving in that direction. So we can chat, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I think, is that time up? Good. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I believe everyone, please just stay in your seats. They're going to set up a panel for the next stage. But thank you very much. It was fantastic to present something on South Africa. Thank you.